Yo, what up guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Man, the world is going crazy once again. It's like every time I make a video, something crazy is happening. So today I was out and I needed to put gas in my car. Goes to the gas station. I reached there and boom, $2 per liter for regular. I was like, whoa. Never thought saw this coming. And I'm there thinking to myself, what has happened and how many people are wondering what has happened. I'm pretty sure if you've searched, you've read about this thing called inflation that has been going on because of the pandemic, right? A basic explanation in terms of how we got here, if you'd ask me, is in the past 2 years, now three, I don't know, since 2020, our governments, when they created those stimulus checks, when they were giving out money to companies, they printed money that they did not have, and now we have oversupply of money, which has taken away the purchase power of the dollars that we have, and that has created the situation where we find ourselves in which we have inflation. But before you judge me, I'm just a guy who loves reading about economics, so I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a qualified economist. This is just my opinions in terms of what's going on. And how we got here is a lot of money was printed and pumped into our economies. So now we're in a situation whereby that money has lost its value. However, the cost of goods has to go up because with inflation, what happens is businesses, are now forced, like the whole situation of the pandemic is businesses are now being forced to pay more to their employees in order to employ people because people were being paid by government. So imagine you're in a state where you're being paid $2,000 a month just to sit at home, and now you have to go back to work and your job pays you $1,400. What would you do? So now businesses are forced to catch up, and with the rising minimum wage, especially in places like here in Canada, one of the challenges that you have is businesses have to transfer the cost that they incur in terms of wages to the customer, and that increases the price of goods. So inflation is a very tricky monster because it's an unending cycle that we find ourselves in. And when I saw my gas price up to $2, it's unsustainable to keep on earning the same amount of money that I did. So for example, think about this. If I spend $50 to fill up my tank, it means with the increase of the fuel price to $2, now $50 only gets me 25 liters. But if my car needs 30 liters of gas, that means I have to spend more. And if I have to spend more, it means I have to earn more. So that means I have to charge a higher price for whatever service or product that I provide in order to be able to cover my costs. So this cycle starts with me, comes to you, it goes to everybody, because we need, in order to just survive, we need to adjust accordingly and according to inflation. So before we go any further, it'll be not good for me not to define what inflation is. All right, inflation is the decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time. So you find that currencies over time, $1 million today is different from what $1 million would have been in the 1920s, right? It has a different purchasing power, or in most cases, money loses value over time. That's why people suggest that you should invest your money rather than to save your money, because we have inflation rates of 3%, 4%, and your savings account only gives you 0.5%. So that's not a very good thing. However, in economics, some people see inflation as a good thing. Some people inflation as a bad thing. It's difficult to understand because the people who see inflation as a good thing, it comes from a perspective that inflation drives demand for products and goods. Because when products go up, when the cost of goods goes up, very few people can afford certain products, so demand increases. However, supply, so for supply, it's like you have an increase in demand, and the one thing that supply allows is to have a higher demand that they can meet, so that increases supply. So when you have increase in supply for that high demand, eventually the prices, everybody eats, right? So that's the view of, okay, the less people can afford that creates a hunger, and that forces the suppliers to find ways to mitigate price in order to meet demand. Because, so let's say gas prices have gone to $2 and very few people can afford that $2. At some point the suppliers have to find clever ways to meet that set demand. However, on the flip side of that, it's people look at it as the higher the price and the lower the money, less people can afford certain products. That's likely to result in people saving money and not spending, which is a challenge because now you have suppliers left with a lot of stock in their hands. So before I butcher a lot of economics for you guys, join me in watching this article which explains why the cost of food, why your cost of food is rising, which I just try to explain to you guys.
An increase in the amount of money that you're spending at the grocery store, you're not alone. The cost of food, electricity, and rent have all been steadily increasing over the past 12 months, a clear indicator that the economy is facing a pretty uphill battle against inflation, with prices climbing the fastest, well, the pace in more than 40 years. The Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, shows an increase of 7.5% over the past year, with a visible impact on prices for things that we love, like pork, chicken, even coffee. The typical American household now spending $250 more a month to purchase the same goods that they did last year. Joining us to break it all down, all the numbers at least, ABC News' Elizabeth Schulze. So, Elizabeth, the typical American household, what does this increase in inflation actually mean?
Well, Kira, simply put, it means that you are getting less bang for your buck. Americans' spending power is going down as we are seeing prices go up at this very fast pace. 7.5% in January from a year before. That's, as you mentioned, the highest rate in 4 decades. And we're seeing these price spikes across the board. So you are seeing and you are paying more for everything from food to rent to apparel to furniture. The important note about this report is that we're not just seeing price spikes in the price of goods, which has been a big theme throughout the pandemic. You know, a lot of Americans shifted their spending onto physical products, and the supply chain was not able to keep up. We're also now seeing services costs go up, so medical care. So just overall, basic staples are more expensive. The cost that you have to pay to get yourself from A to B, transportation costs.
This goes to explain what I was trying to explain to you guys, that one cost affects the other. Like, an increase in gas does not just mean an increase in gas, it means an increase in everything, because everything needs to cover and is an unending cycle. And now we have another challenge because there's a war that's going on, which is, in as much as the world doesn't want it to be a world war, a lot of governments are involved in it, and that has impact, right? Because countries as big as Russia, it's a trading partner to a lot of countries, and whatever they do, and because of how global economies have become, any little thing that happens in Russia affects everybody else. So whatever happens in Russia affects Canada, whatever happens in Canada affects America, affects China, affects Africa. So everybody is affected. So a little bit of inflation in any part of the world changes the global supply system, which is bonkers when you think about it, but that's the world we live in today. Let's continue.
Are going up. And what this means is that even though some Americans are getting wage gains, we are seeing overall wages go up, a lot of those wage gains are not keeping up with the price spikes. So it's being totally offset by this inflation that we're seeing. And really, at some point, this does dig into the household budget. You're going to have to see Americans making trade-offs when it comes to their financial decisions because of the day-to-day and month-to-month gains that we are continuing to see in inflation here, Kira.
I'll tell you what, we've been making big changes with regard to driving. I mean, gas prices are just insane right now. We've been biking a lot more, walking a lot more, which is not a bad thing. So let's talk about food and energy and the shelter, the 3 biggest increases that we're seeing right now. Could we see a change? Could we start to see it get any better?
Yeah, unfortunately, the outlook for those three big categories isn't very good. A lot of it comes down to that the supply, for example, for food, commodity prices are very high. There is strong demand, and those prices are likely to remain elevated because of that. So we saw in this report, meat prices, cereals, dairy, all of that is up. On average, food prices for groceries up about 7.5% just over the past year. I will say there was one silver lining, which was ice cream prices are down, the one place where we saw a little bit of a decrease just in the past month. But overall, that means that, you know, these household budgets are getting hit for some of those basic staples. Gas, you mentioned, is another big one. The important thing about shelter is that that makes up a big part of the inflation data, and we did see shelter costs going up. So that means rent is rising. And why that matters is because when we see price hikes for rent, unlike food or gas, which really does fluctuate a lot month to month, once your landlord raises your rent, it is very unlikely that they're going to bring it back down. So as these rent prices are going up, that is a sign that higher inflation could actually stay for longer. And that is a concern for how long these higher prices will stick around overall, Kira.
I think we're excited about the ice cream, that's for sure. Didn't realize that. So is this trend, do you think it will continue through 2022? Can our viewers expect to see even more money coming out of their wallets in the coming months? What do you think?
Right. So the general assumption from economists is that at least for the next couple of months, we are going to continue to see red hot prices. We're going to see records be continuing to be kind of broken at these as 4-decade high levels of inflation. Now, the key kind of thing to watch here is that the Federal Reserve, the central bank that's in charge of really responding to inflation, is watching this number too. And they're saying we've got to react. And what they're planning to do, likely at their March meeting, is to raise interest rates. So what that does, it makes the cost of borrowing money more expensive. This is really a way to try to slow down how much businesses and consumers are spending so that it can rein in the strong demand that we have seen over the past year. So as interest rates are going to go up, it would likely be an attempt to kind of slow down inflation. And there's an expectation now that because interest rates are going to go up, maybe inflation will go down as the year goes on. But the flip side is that the cost of borrowing money is more expensive. And there is a major risk here that the Fed, you know, has to kind of walk this very tight line and not try to cause a recession by raising interest rates too fast, hurting this economic recovery that we've seen from the pandemic.
The world we live in today, it's ridiculously crazy. The situation on the ground, the situations, the conversations that we should be having, you know, these are some of the conversations that we don't want to be having, but we have to talk about them. You know, money is real. Money problems are real. People are suffering out there. And you just have to be equipped and knowledgeable in terms of what you can do. In terms of suggestions from me, man, it's you need to increase your income. That is the best way to defeat inflation, because you need to increase your income and cut your costs. That's the best way to handle it, because your money is losing value, right? And this is something that will take months, especially because of the war. And a lot of governments will also start printing money in order to be able to support countries like Ukraine. And the war, you might say, oh, what if it just lasts a month? It does last a month, but the way the economies react, especially at a macro level, it's super slow that by the time we realize the impact that the current situation is having, it's probably 2023. And then we like, because right now, we are suffering the effects of the pandemic, and these are effects from 2020 or 2021. You know, it's not, we're in 2022, but this will be the effects of like March 2020, when we shut down and then governments decided to print a lot of money. Now we're in a situation whereby a lot of people have to borrow money because we just came out of the pandemic, right? And we didn't have money, so a lot of businesses have to borrow money. But then, in order to tackle the inflation, when the interest rates go up and then the cost of borrowing goes up, a lot of businesses are going to suffer and a lot of businesses are going to close, which ultimately will result in the recession that she was talking about. So we live in very, very interesting times where we are fighting wars on multiple fronts, and it's not just the physical wars but economical wars as well. And these are some of the conversations that we should be having. Listen, we've reached the end of the video. We can talk about it. Let me know in the comment section if the prices of goods where you are have gone up, and if you've noticed. Me, I've noticed a lot. Like in the grocery store, I see the extra dollar. Like anything that I used to buy for $2.50, all of a sudden it's $3.50, and then I'm just like, oh no, inflation has come. But yeah, there's always a silver lining, and there's always a way out. That's the beauty about this situation. There's nothing, when it comes to economics, nothing is really new under the sun. You know, it's not like the pandemic where we were all like, oh, what's going on? In this case, it's a fixable little situation. Anyway, I hope you're having a good time. I'll see you in the next one. Let me know in the comment section what you think about inflation and how you are preparing your family and yourself for it.